everyone. How is your wonderful day going? Is it going good, bad? Well, no matter what, I hope you're getting through it. Welcome back to the Just Justine Time Podcast, also known as JJ Time. My name is Justine or KittyCat23, depending on where you know me. Today I figured we would dive into mental health and stigmas as a whole, since it's the first official episode. I figured instead of just digging into one specific mental illness, we would just talk about mental health over the years, the stigmas, and just how it affects everyone. What is mental illness? Well, it is defined as an alteration in thinking, mood, or behavior that can affect everyday life significantly. Some disorders include some well-known ones like depression, anxiety, ADHD, bipolar, but there's also some really interesting uncommon mental illnesses that most people don't know about, and that includes DID, which is multiple personality disorder, Capgras delusion, Alice in Wonderland syndrome, and Cotard's delusion. And Cotard's delusion, if you don't know what that is, it's when a person thinks that they are dead. So maybe we'll touch on that in some future episodes. Almost everyone struggles with mental illness at least one point in their life, whether it's minor or have to deal with it every single day. I know myself, I struggle with certain mental illnesses, and I've also overcame certain mental illnesses. So there is hope at the end of the tunnel. I promise you that. But it's very interesting, and I really want to get into the fact that why is it that so many people and so many of the new generation are talking about depression and anxiety and how they struggle to function in school or at work. Yet it doesn't seem like anyone is getting treated. And if you actually look on the news, I personally don't watch the news, but my grandparents do. And they love to inform me that hospitals or psych wards, they're just begging for psychologists. But yet, why is there no psychologists to this day? I just don't understand. My personal theory to that is because since I was in school for psychology and sociology, I truly believe it is very hard to become a psychologist. That was my dream goal growing up. I've always wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and it wasn't until I actually enrolled into psychology till I realized that there is no way I would become a psychologist. And the reason why I say that is because, first you need your 4 years of bachelor's, but in those bachelors you need to have an honors degree, and to get into honors you need a 3.4 GPA or above, which is relatively easy. It is like an 80 to an 84% in your last 3 years, but that's not all. To get enrolled into clinical psychology, it actually got bumped up due to COVID. And classes being online, they did a GPA adjustment. And before it used to be a 3.6 to get into clinical psychology, which is about an 89%. But now it's actually a 3.8 at the university I went to. And if you guys don't know, that is basically a 95% or above in your last 3 years or your last 2 years of classes. And then after that, you have to get accepted. And from rumors I've heard through my grapevine is that they only accept 5 to 10 people a year. So you have to be literally a genius to even be considered to become a clinical psychologist, which is fair because you do need a lot of knowledge because you are diagnosing people and you need to make sure that you're going to give them the right treatment. It really does suck that especially now, there's a lot of private practices that if you even want to get an hour of counseling, it's $100 plus. I don't understand why they would make the fees that expensive. With that being said, I can definitely see why kids nowadays, and especially with the housing market and everything, inflation, is stopping people from getting the help they need. And it really seems like this day's culture is to just grit and bear it, which is an interesting contrast because online and everything, everyone preaches that to take care of your mental health, take mental health days, it's okay, make sure you do all of that, right? But it's interesting because when you actually get into the workforce, I myself was a retail worker for 5 years and I was in fast food for 3 years. So I can say a little thing or two how I would say employers treat mental health, but we will get into that later. But as of right now, I do want to get into the topic of stigmas and what stigmas are. So stigmas stem from the lack of understanding or misinformation that is spread around. It can be tracked back all the way to history and the stigmas around mental health. If you guys know anything about the Salem witch trials, or, back in the day, there was a lot of witches burning at the stake. Well, I did some research, and it turns out that a witch that was burned at the stake most likely just had a form of mental illness, whether that be schizophrenia, delusions, whatever. But it really seemed like throughout the years, mental illness would get shoved under the rug because people just didn't want to deal with it. And back in the day, religion was a really huge thing. Heck, even nowadays, religion is still very huge. It really seemed like you can pray away the mental illness, or you can burn it out of you, literally. And it wasn't, nowadays we don't burn people at the stakes if they are feeling sad one day. But even so, even when modern medicine became a thing, back in the 1950s, that's when lobotomy became a thing. And again, mental illness was shoved under the rug and everything. The guy who invented lobotomies was not actually a certified doctor. He just discovered that if you take like an ice pick looking thing or a long rod and put it in the corner of your eye, your inner corner of your eye, and you smack it really hard with a hammer, that it will sever the nerve in your brain. That will make you essentially become a vegetable or go brain dead, but you're still functioning. Think of people who have growing disabilities, or even, let's say, high functioning autism. You would react the same way. And that is how they treated every mental illness patient. And they also created asylums, and almost everyone in the asylum would be lobotomized. And it was, again, to just sweep it under the rug, because no one wants to deal with a crazy person. So let's just sever the nerve in their brain so that they can't speak anymore. And there you go. They're fixed, even though they weren't actually fixed. Lobotomies were actually invented in the 1930s. And they actually got banned in the 1950s. Yet, a guy named Freeman performed the last lobotomy in 1967, and it actually resulted in the death of that patient. And the reason why lobotomies did eventually go extinct is because some new scientists discovered the form of psychoactive drugs. And now that's how we treat mental illness nowadays, by just mixing up our little brain chemicals, which is a lot better than severing nerves. At least that's what I would say. So now moving forward to nowadays, it's definitely more spoken about. But even so, even when I was growing up, and I think a lot of you can relate to this, growing up, if I was feeling stressed out, or a test was coming up, whether that was elementary, middle school, or even high school, I remember I would always lie to my parents and say that I had a stomach ache, or I wasn't feeling well. Please don't let me go in, because it's pretty common that even if I went up to my parents, and probably a lot of kids, or some of you guys, if you went up to your parents and said, hey, I'm not feeling mentally good today. Can I take a day off? Most of the time, your parents will just laugh you off and be like, oh, get over it. It's just school. There's no reason to be sad. It's the easiest time of your life, And speaking of that, if there is any parents watching me right now, if your son or daughter or non-binary child, because I know that is a new thing nowadays, if they come up to you and say, hey, I can't go to school because I have this really bad stomach ache, I'm telling you to probably dig deeper, because most of the time stomach aches are actually linked to anxiety in kids, and that is their way of telling you, especially as young as 4 or 5. If your kid is having common stomach aches, but yet there's no physical problems, it's most likely due to anxiety or a form of a mental health issue. So please go get that checked out. Do not tell your kids that they're overreacting. Yes, there is a time and place to say that they're overreacting, but most of the time, you probably shouldn't do that. I know growing up, I would always fake sick to get out of school. I was severely bullied from the ages, actually, all the way from kindergarten to grade 7. I was heavily bullied, even though I moved. I've moved place at least 4 times in my school life just to get away from bullying. But it is known that if you are if you're not self-confident, if you are a people pleaser and just kind of say yes to anything, you will be a target for bullying. And that's exactly what happened to me. And, I was a little chunky kid growing up, so that didn't really help either. But going back to different stigmas and why they're affecting the place, there's actually different kinds of stigmas. The first one is public stigma, and that involves negative or discriminatory attitudes towards a person with mental illness. So it's basically, if you look at me and you're like, oh, that girl's depressed, she must be weird. That is what public stigma is. It's bouncing off of each other and coming to a conclusive statement that that person is weird because of their mental illness. There is also self-stigma, and a lot of people can relate to this, but self-stigma means that you feel shame or feel resentment of yourself because you have a mental disorder. It's basically thinking like, oh, I must be like not normal because I have depression or I have social anxiety. Like, why can everyone just... Public speaking is a great example. I've never had an issue with public speaking. Actually, let's get into that. I've never had an issue with public speaking my whole life, and it wasn't until COVID that I actually developed social anxiety. Being inside for 2 years actually made me have crippling social anxiety. I can talk to you guys in front of a camera for hours, but put me in front of a person, I can't speak. But I believe there's different levels to that. People who are actors or public speakers, you usually talk to thousands and thousands of people in crowds, right? And you don't, well, at least for me, it seemed like there was so many eyes on you that it didn't really matter, right? But if there's only a couple people or just one person watching you doing this whole acting or speech, I will have a complete breakdown, especially nowadays. I can't even say hi to random people. I can't create conversation like I used to. So social anxiety can definitely develop from either external factors or genetics. You don't have to be born with social anxiety. It does develop. And that is why you're supposed to teach your kid to be outgoing and go talk to everyone, but not strangers, but talk to everyone, or else they will develop social anxiety. And that is why a lot of the new generation does have social anxiety, because our world is more or less focused all around social media and texting and not even really phoning anymore or FaceTime. And the last form of stigma is institutional stigma. So this involves like private organizations or companies that won't fund mental health issues solely because it's mental health related, and that they rather put their money into other places. I don't know if you guys work at a workplace that doesn't really take mental health seriously. I do know a couple of my friends do have jobs where they take one day out of the month for mental wellness day. I also know at my university we have the what's it called? Pet pals, I think. And once a week you can go to this area and pet a bunch of emotional support pets. And it's really cute. I've been there once, and there's a lot of different fluffy dogs, and I love them. Going into institutional stigma, this is something that I've really had to struggle with, and something I want to talk about and get into is that why is it that if we want to take a mental health day that we feel scared of losing our job? That is exactly how I felt in all of my workplaces, even though it does say in your contract and everything that you are allowed to a certain number of mental health days a year, that even taking a mental health day, there is still some judgment there. I remember there was a time that I could barely get out of bed, and I phoned into work and I was like, hey, like, I am not okay today. Like, I think I need to take the day off. And my boss was like, oh, well, you know what? Just don't come in the morning, but can you be here by noon? And I was like, no, like, I need to take this day off for me. And he kind of just shrugged it off and was just like, no, like, come in at 12. There's no excuse. Like, you're not in the hospital. No one's dying. Come into work. Like, you can take your, like, because I was scheduled at 9, you can take your 3 hours and then get your butt here. And so I did end up coming to work feeling absolutely awful. And it's interesting because even though I showed up to work, my boss basically said, oh, look at you. You must be all better. You showed up. And it's like, no, I'm not better, but it seems like you're hanging my job over my head because I'm struggling right now. I've had some other times where I've had I used to be really close with my bosses, and they would talk about how they would have interviews with people, and the person would be like, hey, like, I have social anxiety. Can I just kind of work in the back and not really talk to people, because the job I worked at, retail, you can either be on the floor helping customers or you can be in the warehouse, doing all the warehousey things. And I remember bosses being like, it's an automatic no. Like, if you have social anxiety, like, why would I hire you if you have social anxiety? Which is fair to a point, which, like, yes, retail, you do need people skills, but what are we going to do when no one can get a job because they're struggling with mental health? It boggles my mind that why is this workplace like so okay and like, oh, like once a month we're going to do a mental wellness day for everyone, yet you won't even hire people who have mental illness. It definitely seems like, is it like the term double-edged sword, or like it's just a slap in the face basically, or backhanded, and it really does suck. And going back to stigmas and psychologists, why no one seems to be getting treated nowadays, there is a study that showed that more than 50% of people who have mental illness don't even try to receive treatment because of fear of losing their job or livelihood. Basically, that means that people are so scared to get help for their depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, whatever, because for fear that their parents or friends or coworkers might judge them. It doesn't make sense. Like, why is it we should go and get treated, yet we can't because people might judge us? And that's exactly what happens. I remember when I was heavily struggling with depression and imposter syndrome. If you guys don't know what imposter syndrome is, it's basically if you've just started university or moved homes or started a new job that is way above your means, usually you will get the feeling of imposter syndrome. I did when I started university, and it basically means that that you think everyone is better than you and that you shouldn't be there. In a way, it means that you don't belong where you are because you don't feel like you're good enough to be there. And a lot of people deal with that. And that's actually one of the reasons I almost dropped out. But regardless, I was struggling with depression very heavily to a point where I was in a ward for a while. I will dig into that in another episode. I'm not ready to talk about that yet. And my parents and friends, actually, no, I can't say that. My parents were pretty supportive during that time, especially my grandparents. My friends, I came back to my hometown after that incident. I only told 2 people. And I guess I should have known that small town syndrome is a thing, or that if you live in a small town, you do know that words bounce very fast. And that's exactly what happened. I ended up only telling 2 of my closest friends. That girl had a sister, and we were all hanging out at this like skate park hangout where, the hangout of the town. And out of nowhere, my best friend's little sister came out just digging at me, calling me all these things. And then out of the blue, she just told like 30 people that no one likes me because of the thing I did. To put it in better terms, to make it make sense, that no one likes me because I'm a depressed freak, basically. And everyone laughed. It was the most humiliating thing I've ever experienced. And it's all because I went and got help. I got treated, but now I was known as this walking nutcase because I went into the ward. And it really sucks because I truly believe that the ward was the best thing that has ever been for me. I can truly say that I don't struggle with depression anymore. I do have sad days, I have bad days, but I am actually treated and it didn't take medication. But that's another reason. There's many different kinds of depression. We will be talking about that in the next episode. There is different ways to treat depression, but it all depends on the person's personality and how they do it. I was on medication for depression and it didn't work. It made me more depressed. I literally wanted to die, and it wasn't until I took CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and that is actually what has worked with me. But again, I will dive into the next episode where we do talk about depression and all of the different forms and types. So getting into a study that was done in 2017, over 200 people who struggled with mental illness reported over a 2-year period that greater self-stigma resulted in lesser recovery and just poorer functioning with their mental illness, all because they felt this type of shame or resentment of their own mental illness. And it's really interesting because I specifically hate how self-stigma is related to someone's shame because of what their friend says or their parent says. Like, the classic where parents will be like, oh, you're just sad, get over it, or you're just nervous, right? And it's like, well, no, sometimes it's greater than that. It irks me in a certain way, because I also have known people that will fake mental illness to get attention. Something that happened around TikTok, I think it was about a year ago, is Tourette's. Tourette's isn't necessarily a mental illness, it's more of a neurological disorder where you get tics, and tics, Sweet Anita, she's a very famous streamer who has tics, as well as what's her name, Trippy Hippie, I think her name is. She came out with a book called My Identical Twin. She suffers with severe tics, and there was a person on TikTok who faked this to get money and attention, and I remember people who did have Tourette's spoke out about it and said that they just brought in this huge stigma to Tourette's now, and now people who actually do suffer with Tourette's get bullied and made fun of because people don't take it seriously, since there are people out there who are faking it. I've also seen in my own personal life, when I was in school, I have seen people go up to their teachers and be like, hey, like, I have severe anxiety, like, I cannot do this test, or I can't do this speech because I just physically can't do it. And then the next second, they're talking to me and being like, yeah, I just wanted to get out of the test, or I just wanted to get out of that speech because I don't like speeches. Not that they actually struggle with mental illness, they can get out of it because they're using mental illness as leverage, even though it's not ever leverage. It's always crushing and soul crushing to hear that. Like, I remember this is such a toxic thing when it comes to eating disorders. I've struggled with an eating disorder my whole life. And I guess if you are watching the video, you'll be like, she couldn't have an eating disorder. She looks healthy. Why is that a thing? I remember when I was at my worst time with an eating disorder that I was talking to one of my friends at the time saying like, yeah, like it's really hard for me to eat. And they laughed at me and they're like, oh, you're just trying to get skinny, or oh, I skip breakfast too. You're not better than me. And it's like, I'm not trying to say I'm better than you. I'm trying to convey to you that it's like really hard for me to go out for lunch with you guys. I'll get into this in another podcast, but to touch on it lightly, I did have a friend where we both had a certain form of eating disorder. And it really seems like nowadays with mental illness, not specifically eating disorders, but it could be anything, that there's competition between friends. I remember with my one friend who had an eating disorder, I'd be like, oh, all I ate was an apple and a granola bar today. And she'd be like, oh yeah, well, all I had was tea. Like, get with it. And it's like, since when did this become a competition? I just wanted to, have some support and be like, hey, I ate today, not feel terrible that I ate because you ate less than me. You know what I mean? It sucks because it seems like these same people who are using mental illness to get out of work, to get out of school projects, are the same people who laugh and make fun of mental illness. And it really sucks that there's no way that we can prove that. And it's coming to a point where you need doctor's notes now to prove that you have a mental illness or that you can't come into work. But with today's age, or especially if you live in the US where healthcare isn't free, you can't just go to the doctor and be like, hey, can you write me a sick note for depression? Like, you need to get hours and hours of counseling, and people don't do that because, again, it is so expensive. I know where I live, I have to pay $120 for counseling, and that's why I stopped going. I cannot afford it. No one can afford it unless you live in a province or a state that you do know someone who does it for free or cheap. I do know that if you are a teenager, there are a lot of free resources, but it does seem once you turn 18 and an adult, you need to start paying. And it's not worth it, But moving on, I want to get onto the subject of quiet quitting and how that relates to mental health. If you guys don't know what quiet quitting is, it has just recently came up on social media, and it's the explanation of how people will not go above and beyond anymore with their jobs. They will just do the bare minimum because that's what they get paid. And, I'm 50-50 on this because with quiet quitting, I was a quiet quitter at my most recent job, but my whole life I always strived for perfection. To put it in perspective, let's say you work in fast food and you get paid minimum wage. I am, I would say, lucky to be in Alberta because minimum wage is $15 an hour. When I worked in fast food, I was in Saskatchewan. At the time, minimum wage was $10. And yeah, $10. It's crazy to think that how you just bust your butt at fast food dealing with customer after customer, and especially mean customers, and you're dealing with this just to get paid a measly $10, like pocket change. And I do know in America now, I'm pretty sure there's one state where the federal minimum wage is only $7.25. It's like, how do you make a living out of that? Let's dive into this for a little bit, kind of straying away from the stigma aspect, but more into fast food. Hello, Guinness. Do you want to make an appearance? No? Okay. I worked at an ice cream place, and basically I would deal with customers. I remember there was one time where we were so short-staffed that it was only 3 of us, a kitchen worker and 2 front workers, and one of the front workers was a shift leader. And I was working the drive-thru, the cash register, trying to make ice cream, cleaning, food running. Like, it was hell, I would have to say. And like, of course you're gonna get mean customers because of the wait times and everything, but I always made sure that I was above and beyond and always with a smile on my face, always happy, and like making sure that I clean. Like, I was always moving, always on my feet. And I like to say that I did good for 3 years, and in this 3 years I didn't get one raise, and most likely it was probably because I was 14 to 17 at the time, but it was like a slap in the face that I was the youngest working person there, doing almost the absolute most, because back then when I was 14 I was like, these stupid older high schoolers don't do their job. And then I turned into that high schooler who didn't do their job. But there's a reason why. And this is why I believe in quiet quitting to an extent, where it wasn't until my 3rd year there, or I think it was 2.5 years. I just turned 16. Or 16 little bit months. And I asked for a raise. And I was like, I'm doing so much. Like, I need a raise. And guess what they did? They gave me a raise to $11. For the next week that the Saskatchewan government made it that minimum wage was now $11. So I came back to them and said, can I have another raise? Because in essence, I didn't get a raise. And they're like, no, like, we gave you a raise, like, don't ask us again. And I was like, what? So this is when I started to kind of resent my job, and this is why many others resent their job. And I started doing less work. I started like just kind of fooling around, but I did also still do my job. I made sure that I wasn't completely useless. And it wasn't until the summer of, oh my gosh, I don't know what year, but it was the summer of when I was 16 that they cut my hours. So when you're in the young certificate program of working, because from 14 to 16, you need to fill out a young workers course to even be able to work, which I did, sadly. They cut my hours to 3 hours a week. Most of the time they would put me on the schedule for 6 hours, but they would cancel one of my 3-hour shifts. And of course, you know, being a 16-year-old who just got a car, like, I want money. I need money. I've been working for this ever since I was 14. So I complained and I was like, give me more hours. And they're like, oh, we can't do that. We're hiring more people. So I was very angry about this, and I went and applied at a retail place, which I ended up working there for 5 years and even got transferred into where I live in Alberta now. And basically, I got the job at the retail store. So I said, I got this new job at Canadian Tire. I'm going to work around your hours because they're only giving me 3 hours a week. So like, it's pretty easy to work around those hours. Turns out they were pissed when they heard this, and they ended up working me a 40-hour week. So I was like, oh, let's do a little Gimbim break. It's a Guinness break. How do you feel about quiet quitting? Yeah, that's some very tasteful words. Do you have anything else to say? No? All right. We love a cute little Guinness intermission break. Where was I? So they ended up working me 40 hours in that week. So I had to tell Canadian Tire and be like, hey, like I can't work these scheduled dates because my job scheduled me, and they were totally okay with it. And then it turns out the week that I worked 40 hours, they canceled 3 of my shifts and sent me home twice. I only ended up working like 16 hours that week out of my whole 40. So I gave them my 2 weeks notice, and they were like, well, why are you giving us a 2 weeks notice? I was like, I either get a raise or I'm gone. And they never gave me the raise because they didn't think I was the right fit. So I was like, okay, yeah, no, okay. But I also wanted to fill out the 2 weeks because that's common courtesy. And they, again, ended up working me a 40-hour week, and they ended up canceling 2 of my shifts. So I was like, you know what? I'm sick of this. I took off my uniform, threw it at them. Not that dramatic. I placed it on the counter, and I walked out during my shift because I was like, if you're just going to send me home early anyways, I'm gone. And that's exactly what I did. And when I went into my retail job, I, again, did above and beyond, but I actually got recognized there. I got 2 raises and a bunch of bonuses, and like my managers loved me and I loved them, because when you treat your workers right, they will actually put in more work. And then when I actually got transferred at this retail job for when I was in university, I got transferred. I, again, went above and beyond, but most of you may know, if you go from a small town to a big city, in big cities, you're a number now. You're no longer like a part of the family. You're just a number. And I came to realize that really quick, because I would just spend hours cleaning the aisles, helping customers, going above and beyond. I will say, city life folk are so miserable. There was a time where this guy said that I was basically pathetic for being 19 and working in retail. When I said to him, I was like, well, I'm in university right now for psychology. And he like said that his daughter had a 4.0 GPA and that his son is this like low life depressed person. Again, going back into mental illness, why is it that just because your son is depressed living in your basement, like unless he's like a 30-year-old playing World of Warcraft, maybe you have like a right to say that. But if he said, I think his son was only like 21 and lived in his basement, which is very common nowadays, and I was very disappointed in the dad for him to say that. But he basically ridiculed me, and I helped him to the best I could. I was very knowledgeable in what he was talking about, but I don't know if it was because I was a woman or because I was a retail worker. He just wouldn't listen to me. And I remember he went to the store boss and said how awful and terrible I was. And get this, just because my manager knew that that's not what happened, because I had a witness. My employee was there with me, and she saw the whole thing happen, but yet the store owner just chewed me out for that one instance. Like, they took the customer's word over mine, even though I've been working there for about, I think it was a year at the time, and I had a witness, and it was just terrible. And it got to a point where I was struggling very heavily with my mental illness during this time as well, that I was taking more mental health days than I would like. I would never miss shifts, but I would definitely swap a lot. And there was also a time where I ended up getting ringworm. And if you guys don't know what ringworm is, before you think, ew, she's so gross, ringworm is not a parasite. Most people think it is. Here's your fun fact. Ringworm is not a parasite. It is a fungal infection. It is the exact same as if you've ever heard of athlete's foot, or I think it's called jock itch. That's more personal. That's all forms of ringworm, and it's due to sweat. Basically, sweat in a moist environment will create ringworm over time. So I ended up getting it. I don't know how. It just happened. And I phoned in to my shift, and I was like, hey, I have ringworm. Like, I can't come in. And they were like, oh yeah, no worries, that's totally okay. And I was like, awesome. So I came into my shift the next day because I ended up getting, like, the ointment, and I didn't have it where I could touch anyone. Like, it was just there, it was all covered basically. And I remember it, if anyone has experienced ringworm, you will understand the burning sensation that it feels. I felt like my legs were on fire. And I told my boss this. I was like, my legs are on fire. Like, I need to like go home or like do something, like do an oatmeal bath. And my manager, I love my manager to this day. Shout out to David. I love you. You're amazing. You are literally the reason why I'm here right now. But he was so understanding about it, right? So I go home, do my little oatmeal bath and everything. And I come back to work the next day because finally it's relieved. My symptoms are going down. And I remember my manager coming up to me and being like, hey, just so you know, the store manager is not impressed by you lately. You've been missing too many shifts. And like your job is on the line, he basically said. And I was like, what? For having actual problems? It was so frustrating. To do a quick little story of what happened and why I quit that job. I did quit for 2 reasons. One, I was already on my way of wanting to become a full-time content creator, but it was also, there was a thing that broke the camel's back, and there was this new guy being trained, and I was helping him. I was, anyone who has had a trainee on their hands, you go around, you stop, you talk, you tell them everything, right? You're not necessarily working, you're more telling them how to work. And I remember I was in the sporting section. I was showing him how to turn on and off the lights if you're opening or closing the shift. And I was just like, showing him, talking to him, and we had just this little conversation of, well, if I open the store, do I need to do this? So we stopped and chatted for a second. We weren't in the middle of an aisle. We were more in our employee section where you can stop and talk. And I remember the store manager's boyfriend came up to me, who ironically was a department manager, and was like, are we chatting or are we working? And I was like, oh, we're working. And even the trainee was like, yeah, she's showing me how to do this. And he cut us off. And he's like, well, get your butts back to work. He said, he was like, get your asses back to work, that you shouldn't be chatting. And as I'm trying to explain to him that I need to talk to him for him to understand. So anyways, we're like, okay, well, that was weird. And then he comes back 10 minutes later, and we're now in a different section. I'm explaining this section to him. And the guy... the department manager not even our department manager got so mad at us and was like, I'm going to split you two because you guys don't know how to work correctly. And my boss wasn't in at the time. And I literally stared at him. I was like, how am I supposed to train this person if I can't speak to them? Make it make sense. And he was like, I'm going to write you up for this. You better watch out tomorrow, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, you know what? Fuck it. So I sent a very wordly tasteful email to my boss, to the store manager, to the owner. I was like, I am not going to have any of this. And basically, yeah, I ended up just quitting. I didn't even give my 2 weeks. I just quit. And that is why I think quiet quitting is becoming a thing. It's people doing their job so much and not even getting recognized that you give up. And don't get me wrong, I don't think you should quiet quit right off the start, but I do believe if you've been working at a company for 3 years and you have gotten 0 promotions, to just give up. No more, just give up. And whatever. And because technically, if you are getting paid minimum wage to work a 9 to 5, your job ends at 5. You do not have to stay. But it does seem that employers hang that over your head that you might lose your job if you don't work your overtime, which is just awful. Something that I want to say about the work field and mental illness is I will argue, this may be controversial, but I will argue that COVID was the best thing for workplace. Is not the economy part of it. Yes, a lot of businesses had to shut down and failed that, but the giant businesses that moved and integrated to online, even school moved to online, I think that was honestly the best/worst decision they could have done, because work production has significantly increased because people do like to work from the comfort of their own home. I myself, as a content creator, absolutely love my job. I get to be in the comfort of my own bedroom and can just pump out all of my work. And a lot of office jobs, I do know my friend who's an accountant, he works from home way more than he works from the office, and you get significantly more work done because you're in the comfort of your own home. And it's interesting because a lot of employers are not happy with this switch, and I really wonder why employers aren't happy. Is it because they can't control their staff anymore? And I think that's it, because if you work a 9-to-5 office job, if you work from home at 5, you are done. You do not need to be there anymore. If your boss is like, oh, well, you need to stay late for a meeting. No, you don't. It's not in my work hours. Are you going to pay me? You know? And that's something that I really liked, especially with university. I struggled very much going to my classes, especially when I was at my lowest point. I couldn't even get out of bed. So the fact that it went online, it was so much easier to do my work, and I significantly saw my grades grow up. But I can also argue it did suck because a lot of people did cheat in that time, and it was either, do you cheat and fake the degree, or do you do the work and get lower grades and not even be able to become what you want because everyone else is cheating, you know? But no, when it comes to the work field, I do believe mental health has been a lot better with online, because you don't need to turn on your camera for meetings. You can just show up. I mean, I'm not sure. I know now there's requirements where you do have to turn on your camera. I'm talking about the start of COVID when this all happened. It's crazy how much work even I pumped out in school. Like, I would do essay after essay after essay, where before, if I had to go to class, I would barely touch it. I would do it the night before. So I guess it does depend on what kind of person you are, but I truly believe that it was good for your mental health, you know? But yeah, that's basically the work side of it, and how I think that it's like really 50-50, good and bad, for everything, and how mental health is being taken more serious, but it's also not. But like I said again, all of history, it's been like that. I can argue that even nowadays, I said that lobotomies were a thing, and then psychoactive drugs has replaced it. I can definitely get into the argument of, is that even a good thing? Because some instances I've seen, my mom is an EA at one of the schools that she works at, and she has even said that so many kids are on ADHD medication. And this is an argument that I've had with a couple people, or a debate I've had with a couple people, and it's that, why are we giving 5-6-year-old kids ADHD medication when they might not actually just have ADHD, they might just be a hyper kid. A lot of kids are full of creativity, full of life. I know me, I was loud, bouncy, like all of that. And a lot of parents will chalk it up to ADHD, when in reality, it's like, no, kids are just very energetic. And if you guys don't know what ADHD medication is, it is an amphetamine, which is basically methamphetamine. And if you don't know what methamphetamine is, it is meth. You know, the hard, scary drug that everyone overdoses on. Yeah, amphetamines is just one, I think it's like 1 or 2 molecules off from meth. And it has similar effects to that drug, other than it is regulated and it won't ruin your life, but it can. And I am not a fan of giving 6-7-year-old kids Vyvanse or Adderall to shut them down. It really seems like, again, we are shoving mental health under the rug. We are giving kids medication to make them shut up, sit down, and obey. And I don't like that. I've never liked that. With school and stuff, how it's like, you need to sit down, shut up, listen to the teacher. There's no room for creativity. It's all just, what's it called? It's like an institution. Like, it feels like a prison. That's why so many kids are like, yeah, I feel like I'm in a prison, because it is. Like, it's conformity to the biggest thing. Like, I remember in kindergarten, I never said I had ADHD. I think I have adult ADHD, which, yes, adult ADHD and kid ADHD are 2 separate diagnoses. But I was a very hyper kid. And so they would put a bungee cord on kids' desks who didn't have, like, who struggled focusing. So, like, you could bounce your feet on this bungee cord or play with it. But going back to stigmas, if you had this bungee cord on your desk, either the teacher would treat you differently, Or the kids would make fun of you because you have this bungee cord. And jealousy was a huge thing. This is going back to people bragging about mental illnesses. There was people who would be like, well, I want a bungee cord on my desk. Why does she get a bungee cord and I don't? And it's the same thing. Why does she get special privileges because she has depression and I don't? And it's like, well, because mental illness is the same as a physical disability. And a lot of people don't know that. And it's just really frustrating. But yeah, going back, I've just seeing that like parents medicate these kids to try to just make them, literally zone out on the bed for hours instead of being hyper. It's ruining these kids' personalities and just their whole form, because with Vyvanse, if taken for long enough, is as hard as, meth or opioids. You need to get weaned off of them. And if you're giving your kid Adderall at 7 years old, well, imagine when they're 17. Imagine when they're 19 or 20. They are now dependent on this drug. And the thing with Adderall and Vyvanse is that it depends. I know America, doctors love to give it out freely. Here in Canada, it is more strict. You do need to, if you have a 30-day prescription, you are not allowed to come even a day before to get your prescription. You need to get it on that day because they fear, I think, of selling it. But that's not the point. The point is that we are making kids dependent on drugs from a very young age. And as a university student who's studied psychology and the medications behind it, it is actually said that you should not be on medication your whole life, that antidepressants are not a solution for depression. Again, it is different if you have like psychosis or schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder. Those are antipsychotic drugs. Those, yes, you do need to be on those for the rest of your life, and that is solely to make sure that, you don't hear voices or start seeing little shadow people. But regardless, I remember when I was when I was studying for depression medication, that it says that you should only really be on the medication for a couple of years, and then you should get weaned off of it, because it is said that cognitive behavioral therapy is the best way to get treated from depression, because if you just heavily rely on antidepressants, it will make you more miserable. And also getting into the drug facts of it, I have met many people, and if any of you guys are struggling with this right now, if you're struggling with trying to find the right medication, because I do know a lot of instances where my friends are like, yeah, I was taking antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds and they just didn't work, or they made me feel worse. That is actually a very common side effect of a lot of drugs that do help you. Or if you think that you've been taking this medication for about a couple months now and it's still not doing anything, tell your doctor. They will put you on a different antidepressant. There are millions, I wouldn't say millions, but there are different kinds of antidepressants that work differently for each person. With antidepressants, there are multiple. There's like Lexapro. That's the one that I was on. There was a bunch of different ones. And I know that some antidepressants, the side effect is the feeling of self-harm or, deading yourself. And if you feel those side effects, you need to go to your doctor and get it changed immediately. Don't just cut them cold turkey, because cutting them cold turkey will make you feel worse, and it will make you sometimes even way more depressed than when you first started. So if you're going to take the prescription medications, make sure they're working for you, but also understand that it is not you should not be reliant on your medication unless you have very severe and that your doctor does say, hey, you might need to take this for the rest of your life. Yes, do that. But if there is an option to get CBT or an option of different ways, do that. Because again, to each their own. I am a person who just thinks that drugs are just to, push it under the rug, right? And I really do hope that in the future, there will be other ways that we can address mental health in the workplace or in schools or everything. Because I know in school is the worst. You get bullied, and the bullies are just relentless. And if you already have like depression, social anxiety, whatever, you're screwed. No, I'm joking. You're not screwed, but you are definitely a more victim to become bullied. But I can't really speak for that nowadays, because I do see on TikTok and social media that there are people bragging about having anxiety, and that it's like a whole thing, that it's like you're cool if you have social anxiety. Like everyone loves the shy girl in the hallway, even though she's crying at night because she has to talk in front of someone. But regardless, I do hope there is some future work for that. So if any of you lovely people out there are struggling with any mental health illnesses or anything, some steps I think you can take, or a word of advice from me, is the number one thing: go get treatment. Whether that's you pay for a counselor or you talk to one of your trusted friends, start small and get help. Get medicated, get treatment, get CBT, get whatever you think that can help you. That is the first step. Secondly, don't let stigma take over your life. Just because your one friend or one family member is calling you dumb or stupid for having depression or an eating disorder and to just eat, or, you know, the classic line, just smile. That's all. You're just sad. Just smile. If they say that, don't let that affect you. Each person, it's your own life. Help yourself, because in the end, it is only you that matters. And if your mom or dad is like upset at you for getting treatment or being on medication, screw them. At least you're going to be in a happier mindset, right? Don't isolate yourself either. I know a lot of you guys feel very alone. I felt very alone when I was struggling with my mental disorders. There is always self-help groups. There is literally the internet. People is there to help you. Even me, my DMs are always open. I always make that clear to everyone that if you know me on Instagram, Twitter, Discord, TikTok, anything, DM me. If there's no one else to go to, there's always me. I am a no judgment zone. I've had people come to me about the most private information that they've never told anyone. It's secret safe with me. Yes, I did study for psychology. There is confidentiality in that. And I will do that. So if your parents aren't listening to you and you don't have any friends, don't isolate yourself. Try and go to someone. I'm not saying go to like Kim Kardashian and talk about your problems, but go to people who are willing to help you. Don't, and this is something that I want to get this straight. Don't equate yourself to your mental illness. If you have bipolar, don't make it a personality trait. People don't like that. If you're like, oh, I have social anxiety, so like I can't do anything. Don't say that. Instead of making it your personality, know that it is a part of you. That if you do have social anxiety, don't be like, oh, I have social anxiety, so I actually can't do that. Be like, I can't do that. You don't need to explain yourself. You never have to explain yourself to anyone. And you know what? If you are one of the people who are getting treatment and are feeling better, speak out about it. Heck, if your parents are giving you judgment for being on medication, speak out. Be like, at least it's helping me. At least I am becoming a better person. And that is one thing that I love to preach, is that if someone is giving you a hard time for something that you cannot change, don't listen to them. Especially because I know in high school, a lot of you guys are always worried that someone will judge you. And I always said that if it's something you cannot change in the moment, don't comment about it and don't feel bad about it. If you have a pimple on your face, that's fine. Okay, it will go away. Get a new skincare routine, do something. But you know what? It's okay to say like, oh, you have lipstick on your teeth, or, you know, your breath smells bad. That is something you can talk about because that is easily fixable. But don't go up to someone and be like, you're weird because you have depression or bipolar. Like, you're crazy because you have bipolar. No, we stop that. Why is this still a thing? I don't understand. But with that being said, I'm going to leave you guys off with this psychology fun fact. Did you know if you ask someone to do a favor for you, they are more likely to trust you and like you more than if you wouldn't? This is due to the Ben Franklin effect. And the Ben Franklin effect is basically someone who does a favor for you is more likely to do another favor for you as long as you do one favor for them. So next time you're out with your friends, do something nice. Buy them a Starbucks drink, okay? And then the next time you hang out, ask if they can do you a favor. Be like, can you do me a favor and lend me $5? Or can you do me a favor and give me a piece of gum? But word it as, can you do me a favor? Because what that's going to do is it's going to, in your friend's subconscious mind, it's going to make them think that you are giving them trust and that you are trusting this person with this favor, and they will actually end up liking you way more than if you didn't, and they will be way more likely to do more favors for you in the future. So next time you're out with a friend, ask them for a little favor, and they might just end up liking you a little more. But with that being said, guys, I hope you guys have a great rest of your lovely morning, night, evening, afternoon, whatever time of day it is. I hope you are having a great day, a good day, a bad day. Just remember, is it a bad day or just a bad 5 minutes? Thank you guys for coming to the Just Justine Time Podcast. I hope to see you here next week while we talk about depression and what it is and all the different forms and how it affects everyone, at least to a certain extent. If you haven't already, make sure to like, share, and follow. If you haven't already, or if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, please rate this podcast 5 stars if you want to hear more of me. Other than that, like, subscribe. I hope you have a great rest of your day. If you haven't already, go follow me on my socials. The link will be down below. I am kittycat23 or Justine Bijou. I hope you guys have a great day.